Hello and welcome to the Digital Digest, your weekly breakfast of insights, tips and tricks and general information that help anyone trying to move things forward in this digital world of accounting. This is our second live show, and this one is sponsored by iplicit, the mid-tier cloud-based finance solution for anyone that is growing out of or outgrowing the likes of Xero, QuickBooks, the small SME side of the finance solution. We are discussing today systems for hospitality businesses, and I've been lucky enough to be joined by John Toon, another member of the Digital Disruptors, as we kind of dive into the specifics you need to be considering if you are looking into a modern ERP in this space. So, John, look, let's dive into what hospitality means. What kind of businesses, feed into that hospitality space?
Hey Ryan, great to be with you. And I guess, hospitality is quite a broad one, but obviously, hopefully, very familiar with most people because we usually experience hospitality, particularly when we're going to events and things. So I guess the typical stuff we're covering is things like cafes, restaurants, fast food takeaway type things, and then also accommodation, so hotels, B&Bs, but also I think we tend to find that you get events type businesses or events management businesses, kind of falling into this bracket. And so you've got quite a broad brush, of sort of types of businesses, even within this sort of one category, and different sets of requirements as well. It can get quite complex.
Definitely. It's a huge sector, and we're going to try and cover this in a broad way. We'll talk about, I guess, some of those needs, some of those functionality requirements we need to consider, the pain points that businesses in this space may feel, especially, as they're coming out the other side of COVID. I know we're now 5 years, I think, for further down the line for a bit, but the impact it still has had on so many businesses, and the limitations on growth. So I guess it's imposed from a cash flow perspective. So let's talk a little bit about the requirement side then. So I think what's critical in most businesses that are in hospitality is a point of sale system, right? That's kind of your bread and butter. That's your go-to, and the thing you absolutely have to get right. After that, then what's it like? People management, staff scheduling, staff turnover. What else, John?
Yeah, I think, the POS absolutely is fundamental, and quite often we find that POS systems in these kind of businesses can be disconnected from everything else, which makes things difficult. So, for example, that ability to take an order at a table and have it go straight through to the kitchen, that seems like a fairly basic requirement. But I guess in the good old days, it just used to be a piece of paper you'd write on and pass it through a hatch. But now you can do that digitally. I think again, if you're sort of thinking about a food and beverage business, there's an element of inventory management, and obviously that's fairly key insofar as being able to manage recipes and usage, but also that you're going to have fresh goods that will perish over a period of time. There's then additional things like expense management, because there's also almost always sort of like odds and sods where you have to grab a pint of milk or something at the last minute. And then integration things I think are quite important when you're sort of talking about takeaway businesses, because obviously you've got a whole bunch of things like Uber Eats and stuff where you want to be able to again get those orders coming through, flowing into your internal systems, and of course for us accountants, flowing into your accounting system at the back end. And then I guess when you sort of start moving into the sort of the accommodation side, again, you want integrations with some of the booking sites, so like booking.com, etc., but also probably an integration into your website to be able to take bookings through the website and again have that all in the same place, because the last thing you want is bookings for a room that's been booked 3 times over and people turning up and it being very difficult to manage. And I think off the back end, there's a whole bunch of stuff probably around loyalty, because that's increasingly important. And then finally reporting as well, particularly if you're multi-site, because being able to maybe compare and contrast how different sites are doing and being able to manage that more effectively is really important.
Yeah, I mean, the huge breadth that we've just dived into in requirement shows the challenges for businesses in the space. And as you say, so many have just got a finance system, be that, it could be as good like as Xero, QuickBooks Online. They've gone to the cloud, but then they've got just a standalone point of sale, which will be able to export a report at the end of a period, but they've got to get that information into their finance system. They may have a disconnected card, payment device, which is once again storing information separately. They're having to type it in, increase of risk of, fraud and error. So the number one place that I always go when I'm talking to business in the space is get your point of sale system integrated into finance with an integrated card payment device. And that's kind of your bread and butter. Once you've got that, then you can build all the other, I guess, systems, processes on top of it. So what do you think is some of the leading point of sale systems out there? I mean, back in the day, I loved a bit of the Good Till Company. So people may remember this, especially before it was bought by, I think, SumUp. I think bought it.
Mm-hmm.
And it had, similar to what you were saying, John, it had elements. It was like a little ERP in itself that you could bolt on elements as when you needed as you grew. But there's others, and there's the huge one probably is Lightspeed, isn't it?
Yeah, Lightspeed absolutely is probably the biggest one in the space. Who are now sort of part of Vendor part of Lightspeed. I can never quite remember which way around it went. But I think for me, Lightspeed probably is the one that ticks most of the boxes for the sort of food and beverage business, because you've got lots of those elements that we just talked about in terms of, clearly you can start taking orders at a table using an iPad or something. You can also have a proper till system as well, but it will then allow you to pass those orders through to a readout or a machine in the restaurant, in the kitchen, and there's some small elements of stock management within the system as well there. And to be honest, I'm a bit of a nerd, because whenever I go out for food, I'm often kind of like looking to see what they're taking their orders on or how they're taking payments off me, and then I can figure out whether or not that does integrate with the system and try and guess whether they're in the Xero ecosystem or a QuickBooks system or just standalone, and then they're making a meal for themselves, as it were. So those are definitely there. I think probably the other two that we see quite a lot of. Square is very popular. They marketed quite aggressively into that market, and I've got some good setup. I don't think they've maybe got. I don't think they cover maybe all of the bases that Lightspeed does. And then EPOS now is also in there, which again we see quite regularly and pops up, in lots of places. Again, I would say, in a similar way, sort of relatively similar to Square, that probably covers some of the bases, but I don't think probably covers all of them quite as comprehensively as sometimes we find clients need.
Yeah, and you got to start somewhere and you got to build up. And I, similar to you, John, when I'm out and about, I kind of see a point of sale system, a payment terminal. I'm like, oh yeah, I wonder how it's working, where it's connected. And I don't know if it's the east of England, but I do see a lot of EPOS now around. And I'm like, oh yeah, know them. And there's pros and cons, like of the systems in how they work together, how they work remotely. So if you are, I guess, more out in the sticks, then like an edge system where it needs to be able to work on its own if the connectivity dips, and it can then share information back up. So you've got different requirements based on where you are logistically, but we're focused very much so far on the food and beverage, the restaurants, the cafes, the bars to some extent, and hospitality is much broader than that, as you said at the start. So as we move into, I guess, some of the hotel or B&B areas, you've got completely different systems you have to look at, don't you? Things such as maybe Preno or Try Booking, or I think you'd also mentioned Beds24 you've worked with before.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's where these differences do start to come in, and I guess the hotels, some hotels might have restaurants as well, so or they might have a pub that's sort of connected to them that's next door that they also run, and so you can see how these complexities build up. But certainly, I think I guess the core thing for any accommodation business is being able to manage bookings first and foremost, being able to get a diary effectively online and connected into a whole different bunch of things. And we touched on it briefly at the beginning, didn't we? You probably have a website, so you want to be able to sell rooms through the website. You may well then be connected into some many of the different aggregators like booking.com and things like that, or you might be an Airbnb type business and selling through Airbnb, and so being able to get all of that information passed back and forth to make sure that you're not going to sort of duplicate bookings or make mistakes, and also make sure that your accommodation is available in case some of these places do shut down in say like winter periods and other things. Having all of that there and be able to manage it is really, really important, and that in itself can be quite complex, because even a reasonably small hotel might have multiple different versions of rooms. So you have single room, double rooms, twin beds, etc. And so there even that what feels like a relatively basic setup, because it feels like you're just selling rooms, can be much more complicated. And then you can have all sorts of as accommodation gets bigger and more complex, there's just more and more complexity that goes into it. But like I say, that core thing is being comfortable that if you've got a bookings diary, that it's reliable and it's being updated on a regular basis, so that you're not going into this difficult position of running the risk of being double booked somewhere. And quite often, again, when you plug into things like booking.com and things like that, you will find that there's quite often a delay, which you might have experienced yourself, in terms of, like, if there's a failed sale, they'll still hold that room for a period of time. So it's probably held for about 20 to 30 minutes. And that's just to kind of ensure that kind of crossover of potential double bookings doesn't happen. So that's one of the ways that these systems make it work.
Yeah, I mean, the complexity is already mind-blowing. We've only covered a couple of areas, but one thing that is fundamental, I think, across the entire hospitality space is staff turnover. That is something that is unlike a lot of other businesses, and is a key focus on any business that has to be looking at the systems it can bring in. Like scheduling, massive priority for any business in this space. So a system that can allow easy clock in, clock out, what I call reactive or proactive scheduling, where you're putting something in, but then if someone is sick, you can just ping that out to all relevant staff, so they've got the opportunity to jump in based on their skill sets and whether they can, I guess, do the role. And then linking that information directly into your payroll system, so that you are not having to rekey, I guess, this person did these hours, it automatically flows in, is a huge time saver. I mean, I know clients I've talked to that save like a week in a month of time just by integrating their scheduling system into their payroll. So I assume that anytime you're talking to these businesses, one of the first things you start talking about is, well, what do you do to manage your staff?
Yeah, I think it's probably the second one after the EPOS system, I guess, because we're accountants, right? So we focus on the money first, and then we deal with the people afterwards. But totally, I mean, and I think if you talk to any any business in this sort of trade, unless it's something really small like an Airbnb that you're running on your own, scheduling staff, managing staff is really difficult. And quite often, as we probably all experienced at some point, is you get quite a lot of what I kind of describe as like transient staff, insofar as it'll be students, doing work for a period of time, but sort of coming and going, or they might just do a Friday and a Saturday and then don't work the rest of the week. So you don't have huge amounts of continuity in your core staff base. You've got lots of sort of effectively like turnover, but also, as you said, you've got these scheduling issues, and particularly if you're running maybe like a bar, for example, or a restaurant that's maybe open for say like lunch and dinner. You've effectively probably got 2 or 3 shifts there that you've got to fill, and again, sometimes staff can be unreliable in these things. So as you said, Ryan, you can have people scheduled who then just don't turn up, and you need to be able to cover that as well. So I think there are a number of things at play here. Number one is being able to schedule out properly and being able to see that visually. I think that's really, really important. Then obviously being able to feed that into a system that then says, right, Ryan, you've been scheduled for the the late shift on Friday night. That means you need to be here for 7, and then you'll be going home at 1 in the morning or something. And also, sometimes some of these systems do allow staff to be flexible, insofar as if you were booked for it, you could turn around and say, actually, no, I can't do Friday, but I'm going to pass it on to John, and John will do it, and I can pick up that shift and accept it in the system. And so from a management point of view as well, it actually places less reliability and responsibility on you, and going, oh God, like Ryan can't do this, I've got to go and find someone else, because you can actually hand that responsibility back to the staff, which I really like. And then, as you say, there's a whole bunch of other things in terms of clocking in, clocking out, managing time off and sickness, and all of those things, which then feed into the payroll numbers, which can be quite complex. And again, typical payroll for even a small restaurant can probably have 30 or 40 people on it, just because of the numbers that you have, but they might not always be getting paid through that payroll every time payroll is run. And again, in quite a lot of food and beverage businesses, the payroll is still being run probably on a fortnightly basis, in some places weekly as well. So you've got quite a lot of frequency of that kind of this regular admin of things going on in the background.
Yeah, so automating as much as possible, and that is a huge time saver. You have scheduling managers, right, in some of these businesses, and managing to reduce their burden is quite a big relief. Whenever I've talked to businesses in this space, they love it. I mean, I know lots of people worry about their jobs, but the scheduling manager is the first one that goes, no, please help me here. I need that. So, I mean, the other thing when we're talking about staffing is that high staff turnover, and to really deal with that effectively, having a HR system that can integrate into job boards, can go through that kind of early vetting, and then pull that information directly into payroll and the scheduling app, just makes it like a seamless experience. So the person that is coming into your business already feels potentially part of it before they even walk through the door, right? Because they've got a feel for how you operate. You maybe done some introductory videos, some guides on what they'd expect on their first day. So if we talk a little bit about systems in this space, like we're looking at pure scheduling, the one that's probably been around the most and probably is the biggest is Deputy. That is just the absolute core. And then obviously you've got Plan Day that's come in a little bit later, especially as when Xero acquired it, it became a bit more prominent. But a system that I work quite closely with, purely because it does the HR to the scheduling to the payroll, is Employment Hero. And if you do want something that's more advanced and can do everything, that's a good system to dive straight into. Is there any other systems that you've come across in this space, John, or is it pretty similar to my experience?
Yeah, it's very, very similar. I think probably Deputy is the one that we go for more often than not, because it tends to be that clients prefer it. And I think where it excels particularly well is like multi-site businesses as well, particularly around that sort of scheduling management, because that again just adds another layer of complexity, because you're not just then trying to schedule for one restaurant or one hotel, you're trying to do it for multiple sites. So yeah, that's where we tend to end up. But we've also put Employment Hero, and you can kind of dovetail Deputy with Employment Hero as well. So you've got a few options there. And I guess the key thing is, with all of these things, it's understanding how these integrations work, helping to understand what the data flows look like in terms of, are they one way, are they two way, what happens, for example, if someone books a holiday in Employment Hero, does it go through to Deputy? And so can you see that on the schedule so that that you're not going to try and book someone for Friday if they're off on Friday, for example?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of systems. We covered it from the key ones being point of sale, staff scheduling, and we've gone into the specific things around what works well for I guess the restaurants, cafes, compared to those that are in the hotel B&B space. But we're talking a lot about individual systems here. You still need to get your core finance right, and a lot of businesses on the small end would focus on potentially Xero, but hospitality is high transaction volume, and you can't push everything through. Some systems, they look at the integration and go, oh yeah, we're gonna sync everything through into these into the likes of Xero, QuickBooks Online, Sage, and Free Agent, but it just overwhelms the system. So those that are smart enough, they consolidate down a daily basis. They link that up to the cutoff date for your payment terminal as well. So you've got a one-click reconciliation at the end. That is where working with an accountant that is digitally minded can save you so much time, because aligning those, and that can vary, right? You might be a business from hospitality that you open late. You go on to like 3 a.m. You're not going to want a midnight cutoff. That's going to be absolute madness. So you've got some flexibility in some of these systems, and aligning them, making sure that the feeds are going to the right place. So literally it's either a one-click or a control account that manages them is key. If you're not doing that, and if you are having problems, anyone that's listening to this, or you've got clients having problems, there is a solution to this. Talk to someone that is an expert in this space. But we've got the likes of Xero, we've got the likes of QuickBooks Online, but you do outgrow them. And so you need to move into our larger system, and you've got options. So Twinfield, one that I think, John, you and I tend to just moan about a lot as a more archaic system. It's been around in the cloud for a long time. It is something that has excelled in the hospitality space. I know it's something that 4.0 as a digital consultant have brought in a lot, and it works very well for franchises, I believe. Is that your understanding?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, I've seen it in use in franchise businesses in particular. And again, they do just tend to be multi-site, and I guess quite often from an ownership point of view, if you're owning the franchise, rather than being the franchisor, the franchisee rather, then you're interested in, like, what is the performance of these various sites, and how can I manage those more effectively? And that's where your volume just go like stratospheric, isn't it? Because you're suddenly looking at like crazy numbers in terms of purchase invoices, sales, etc. And so it does have pretty decent reporting in there. I mean, again, I guess outside of that, you can do reporting across multi-site businesses with things like Spotlight and Fathom as well, and again, they're kind of like tuned up for that. But as you say, it's kind of it's the volume thing that kills it if you're in the Zero ecosystem, and that's where products like Twinfield, or even I know iplicit are sponsoring, but you might even step up into a product like iplicit if you got really, really big and had big volumes, and that's the key thing for managing this. And you've got to remember as well that pretty much all of these businesses will be VAT registered, or they should be VAT registered generally. And you've got MTD for VAT to comply with in terms of the regulations and requirements about having your systems digitally linked and being able to record everything appropriately.
Yeah, and I do love the what's the word for this? Not the out, but the flexibility that those in the hospitality space have for MTD is that you don't have to sync every transaction. You'd have the ability to consolidate into a daily summary and push that through into your finance system. But it does have to be daily, and it does have to go in. You can't consolidate weekly or monthly, and you do have to be pushing it in. You don't have to do it on the same day, but it does have to go in. So if you can do that in real time, it saves just so much hassle. Plus, it brings you the ability to report on that. Now, we've talked on it many times. Reporting is critical, and you can get that in a lot of these very advanced EPOS systems. You can bring it out, and you can do it in dashboard format, and so that individuals can see, information that's critical to them. So if you've got someone that's a business owner, they're going to want to see certain information. If you've got someone that's managing a site, they want to see the information that's relevant to them. So the reporting is critical, and make sure you look at that when you're diving into the specific point of sale system that's right for you. But we've talked around lots of requirements, lots of systems. I think, John, what might be quite helpful is talking about some tangible fixes that business can focus on, so that they can, when looking at any of this, go, okay, I need to make sure I get this right. So we've talked about integrations, and those vary massively. So number one I always look at, as we've said, you want it to integrate, is dive into how the integration works, what flexibility you have. I know that we focus on that, but do you think that's something that businesses generally miss? They just go, oh, it connects, it's fine.
Yeah, I mean, I think my experience in this space is that people get sold point solutions for things. So, going back to EPOS, because we sort of opened the talk about that, is a classic one where you'll get someone who's selling a card machine or an EPOS system. They turn up and go, oh, we can save you a load of money, and then you get a brand new set of card terminals and maybe an EPOS system, but it's all standalone, and so it doesn't, like I say, it doesn't integrate, and that for me is the biggest challenge. Or it doesn't do the other things that you want it to do in terms of when you're looking at how much of a particular type of meal is ordered, for example, so you can understand what your kind of trends are, and then that helps the kitchen staff to place orders going forward in the future. It's those kind of things that you miss if you don't have a good quality ecosystem that allows you to sort of drill into what is it exactly that you're selling, and how frequently does that happen. And again, when you think about the reporting that we do, particularly in the food and beverage industry, we tend to talk about covers rather than talking about sort of, when we're looking at margin and stuff. So what we're interested in is like, how many covers can we do in a particular sitting, in a particular shift? What's the average spend per customer, for example? What's the, how long maybe are they even sitting at the table? So how quickly can we turn the tables around and stuff, and get more covers into a particular time frame. And if you don't have good quality EPOS that allows you to see that, then you're missing all of that data, which means that you can't then run your restaurant effectively.
Yeah, and that's when you then, you've got the core down, and you've got the ability to enhance that by looking at the loyalty systems, because not only are you looking at covers, but how many times are these individuals returning? Can we increase that? Is there certain deals or I guess certain nights, certain events that we do that can really lure those in that are our higher spending customers? And without those loyalty systems, it's really hard to track any of that. So I know traditionally you might have a card that you use and people can track the card, but something that actually pings something to their phone, they go, oh, that looks interesting, maybe we'll go down there the next week because they've got an event on that's right for us. And having that focus rather than just blitzing anyone is a key probably advance that the cloud systems have brought out that the more traditional systems have struggled to do in the past.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah,
and I think
Sorry, go.
I was just going to say, I think, one of the things that you get with these advantages, and again, it comes back to integration, is that you see with some of these EPOS systems, for example, that, if I'm a returning customer, that can go into a MailChimp thing, for example, and become a campaign that you then start to say, right, okay, and talk about exactly what you were saying in terms of like, right, okay, well, John loves to go to the pub on a Friday, so let's send him a thing that says, there's something happening this Friday, and encourage him to come back. Or if I go AWOL for a few weeks, that returning customer hasn't been for a few weeks, and we need to go and do something and just try and figure out why. So it's those kind of things that you get, and that's all in the data. But if the data is not there to be sort of analyzed and presented or shared with other systems, then you can only do that manually if you collect it at all.
Yeah, and I think going back, you look at these big businesses, the ones that are huge brands, think, they've got this massive advantage because they've got these systems that can do this data. But this is possible for small businesses. You just need to get the right system set up. And as you said earlier, it's not about looking at an individual system. It's about looking at an IT strategy. Where are we? Where do we need to get to? You can't do it all at once, but you need to build up to it. And you focus on the key systems early on, the core, and then overlay requirements over time. And I think that's a good place to kind of summarize the overall systems before we probably do our normal thing, John, which is to dive into our bed by bin. What is the systems we love? What are the systems that we want to invest in? And those that actually we hate them. So I know I always throw this out to you, but I'm gonna take the plunge first and go into it. So from my perspective, the one that I love and always go to, one that I think solves a lot of problems in this space, and I know clients that have used it and seen a massive difference, is Employment Hero, because it just solves for me so much of that people management, which is a critical factor in hospitality. So that's my bed. That's like where I'm not really having to think too much about. That's where I'm like, yeah, it's always going to be there as a consideration. My buy, what do I think that? See, I always loved the Good Till Company. I thought the user interface was great. When SumUp came along, they kind of pulled back a bit from what they were doing, but it's still there. It's still building. And what I'd really love is that that for SumUp to, rather than go insular, expand again and kind of allow connections, allow growth, go into the partnership model, and build through that. And I'm gonna say that's my buy, because I think it's got so much potential to expand if they stop looking inwards. My bin. What's my bin? You know what? I think I'm probably going to go with the likes of, and I'm sorry, but I'm going to go back to our old kicking horse, which is Twinfield. It just frustrates the heck out of me, and that really actually comes about the way the data is managed and the fact you can't move it. So if you did want to transition away from maybe someone that has implemented it for you, it's just incredibly painful to do. And that is a big frustration. It feels like you're locked into a partner where, the whole thing about the modern world is flexibility, being able to move. And so that's probably my bed by bin. Yours, John?
I love that. So I'm going to go slightly left field with these, right? So I think my bed is a product that we haven't even talked about, but I think it's really important, and that's Lightyear, because the sort of the cost management side of these organizations, particularly when they want things like line item extraction quite often because they want to record purchases of particular types of food, for example, or whatever, to go into another system. I think that's really important. I can't buy them because Access have bought them, so I'm gonna bed them instead. I think in terms of like who I would buy, I'm going to go Lightspeed. I mean, again, I'm fairly certain that they've been bought by vendor, whichever way around it was. But I think Lightspeed is an absolutely incredible product. It's like probably one of my most favorite things in the space, and it just does so much, and it's really, really cool. And in terms of bin, I could follow you and go Twinfield, because I'm not a big fan of Twinfield at all, particularly since CCH bought them and basically trashed what was probably one of the really good upstart cloud products. But I'm going to bin every standalone manual crappy EPOS system and card reading system that all of these fly-by-night salesmen sell to these kind of businesses, because they'll shave 3p off their card charges or something, and that's the way that they sell them.
Really feel that was just a cop out, mate. So I'm going to bin all the traditional stuff. Go modern. But I think that's a great place to wrap up this week's show. Hopefully this episode has provided you like any valuable insights on how to take anything forward, whether it's with clients or yourself in the hospitality space. Please do check out the show notes for links to the Digital Disruptors, our wonderful sponsor, iplicit, and any system that we have referenced throughout this episode. The systems we've talked about are just examples. This is a huge space and there's so many options out there. And find the right system that's bespoke for you is critical. So please do talk to a digital transformation specialist if you are looking to dive into this and find something that can launch your business forward. If you want to ensure you catch future episodes, especially when we dive into the relevant areas of hospitality in more details, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and make sure you look out for the live show every Thursday. And if you want to come in, ask us questions, drill into us, and criticize our opinions, please do so. We always love a challenge. We look forward to speaking to you again soon.
Cheers, Ryan.